Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One, and this is Race to Power with me, Hemkaur Saroya. As international pressure grows on Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a fiery speech at the United Nations General Assembly, also saying that he's sending a message to the hostages, for which he said loudspeakers had been arranged around Gaza, and broadcasting a message for Hamas as well. We'll tell you all about it. And US President Donald Trump has passed an order to investigate individuals and organizations which he claims are funding left-wing political violence. We'll discuss that as well. So amid increased scrutiny internationally, Israel's Prime Minister addressed the United Nations General Assembly a short while ago. As Netanyahu walked to the podium for his address, many delegates across UN member states left their seats, walked out of the assembly in an apparent sign of protest which indicates rising pressure on the Israeli leader. But a defiant Bibi centered his speech on slamming Hamas and a claim that Israel's existence remains under threat from the region.
But we're not done yet. The final elements, the final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job. That is why we want to do so as fast as possible.
Netanyahu went on to address the hostage crisis, as many still remain in Hamas captivity, their fate dependent on a stalled ceasefire negotiation. As Bibi spoke, protests and rallies unfolded in New York demanding a deal that will release all hostages, a mission which Israel has claimed since almost 2 years but has failed to achieve in Gaza. As the Gaza Strip lies in ruins, international pressure, once again, I'm telling you, is mounting on Israel's Prime Minister. The most substantial remark has come from the corridors of US, Israel's biggest ally. While speaking to reporters at the White House, US President Donald Trump said that he will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. The comments come after Trump met with leaders from Arab and Muslim countries on Tuesday on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly.
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this directly?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it. Whether I spoke to him or not, I did. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now, okay?
Now, Trump has also said that meetings with different stakeholders in West Asia have been fruitful in bringing everyone closer to a deal on Gaza. These comments come at a time when calls are growing in the international community to stop the war in Gaza. More recently, the global call has been accompanied by several Western countries officially recognizing Palestine, but the conversation of statehood remains paused until Israeli strikes stop on the besieged enclave and peace is restored for more than 2 million displaced Palestinians. As horrific visuals of carpet bombing in civilian areas continue to emerge from Gaza, countries are now resorting to other means to ramp up pressure on Israel. Slovenia has imposed a travel ban on Benjamin Netanyahu, becoming the first European Union nation to slap any sort of sanction on the Israeli leader. On the other hand, Spain has for the third time cancelled an arms deal with an Israeli defense company. The latest cancellation of a $207 million deal comes as part of other measures, which Spain's Prime Minister says are crucial to halt the genocide in Gaza. Now, for more on this, Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. We heard Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu address the United Nations General Assembly, quite a fiery, packed speech there. He mentioned a lot of things, especially the message for Hamas that was being broadcast to all Gazans on their mobile devices, as well as the loudspeakers, which he said had been arranged so that the message could go out to the hostages as well. Susan, what would you say were some of the biggest takeaways for you?
Benjamin Netanyahu really tried to frame this speech and Israel's war against Hamas as not only an Israeli fight, but also a U.S. and European fight. We saw that on numerous occasions he drew parallels to 9/11 and also incidents that happened during the Holocaust in Europe as well. it was heavy on anti-Semitism, and he was defiant to say that this fight is going to continue. Towards the end of his speech, he also mentioned Iran, which was very important. He said that it's very close, it's very near, that the people of Israel and Iran will share peace and prosperity, perhaps a message to the Iranian regime back home, which is definitely listening to his speech as well. But I think it's noteworthy that the speech came not only shortly after President Trump made that comment about how he's not going to allow the annexation of the West Bank just yesterday, but also just minutes after Netanyahu stepped down from the podium. President Trump, on his way to the Ryder Cup here in New York, said that he believes and he thinks that they have a deal on Gaza, and the hostages, dead and alive, are going to be coming home very soon. So there is a lot of developments going around Netanyahu's speech, but nonetheless, as you mentioned rightly, this was a defiant speech, really showing that Israel is not going to stop. Netanyahu took this opportunity to sort of try to quell some of the media narratives that's been going around regarding Israel and the war against Hamas, the starvation, the malnutrition of Gazans. Those are things that the UN has been very critical of. He pinned that on Hamas and said that Israel is doing its best to not do that. So he was defending himself in many ways, but nonetheless, you know, it really does come at a time when the Middle East is at a critical juncture, and that's why we're seeing just one news after the other coming out, and the world is watching to see what really is going to happen ultimately with Gaza. Yeah.
You're right, Susan. He did say that Israel's war, it's fighting a war for everyone, Europeans and Americans. He said it means everything that they're fighting, they're doing the dirty work for them, also quoting Germany there. And he also mentioned that Palestinians themselves do not want and do not believe in the two-state solution. A lot was said, but of course the fact of the matter is that on ground, nothing changes well if nothing changes. So of course, how things pan out going forward, that's something that remains to be seen. Susan, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on this. All right, now the US remains caught up in the left versus right political storm. Amid rising rhetoric and divisive discourse, US President Donald Trump has passed an order to investigate individuals and organizations which he claims are funding left-wing political violence. Trump signed a presidential memorandum on Thursday which empowers the FBI, the Justice Department, and other agencies to probe and subsequently prosecute individuals, financiers, and funding groups. Trump has repeatedly claimed that liberal stakeholders have played a role in financing protests and political violence. However, the US president's claims are unsubstantiated and do not include references to all the instances of political violence against the Democrats.
Radical left rhetoric. The radical left is causing the problem. They're out of control. They're saying things, and they're really dumb people. I mean, I look at Crockett. I look at some of these people. They're very low IQ people, actually. But the radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left.
In the latest, the US president also celebrated ex-FBI chief's indictment. Trump hailed the legal move, claiming James Comey, and I'm quoting here, one of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted on 2 criminal counts. Comey, a prominent critic of Trump, is charged with making false statements to Congress and obstructing its investigation of the Russia probe. The indictment of a former FBI director is unprecedented and the culmination of a years-long feud between Comey and Trump. Trump fired Comey in 2017. At that time, Comey was investigating whether Russia interfered in the 2016 election and if Trump or any member of his campaign colluded with the Russians. The charges came days after Trump publicly urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to take action against Comey and others he sees as enemies. Reacting to the charges, Comey posted a video saying he was innocent and that he had faith in the U.S. judicial system. He said that he knew for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but he was not afraid.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, And she's right. But I'm not afraid. And I hope you're not either.
If convicted, Comey faces up to 5 years in prison. According to federal prosecutor Lindsay Halligan, who was appointed by Trump just days ago, she is a former personal lawyer to the president who has no experience as a prosecutor. She was appointed to the high-profile post of U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia following the resignation last week of the previous U.S. Attorney, Eric Sabert. For more on this, John Ports is joining us from Boston. He's a professor of political science at Northeastern University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on WION World this one.
Glad to be here.
Professor, let's just first try and understand the implications of this memorandum that Trump has signed. What is your assessment of it?
Well, he's, putting down on paper and moving forward with what he's talked about from the campaign of going after people, retribution, going after people who have previously been involved in indictments that he himself faced between his presidencies. So it takes it to a new level, for sure.
Right, Professor, of course. Now, when we talk about this right versus left-wing extremism rhetoric, do you think the real issues are being buried? Because we've been seeing a surge of this rhetoric in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's killing.
Yeah, I mean, and President Trump has certainly amplified that. I mean, there are other examples on the other side. More recently, a state legislator in Minnesota was killed, and her husband. From someone on the right. So, I mean, we clearly have an issue both on the right and the left in terms of extreme actions.
Right. When we talk about extremism and such rhetoric, do you think it's more damaging? It does not add to the discourse, because we did do a poll a few days back as well, which shows how a lot of people in the United States of America fear that the public perhaps is becoming more intolerant. This sort of rhetoric doesn't seem to do much to inspire confidence.
No, I think people would hope that there's some way of trying to bring people together, at least to try to create some bridges, but that's not really happening. And the president is a position to do that probably better than anyone else, but he's lining up on one side of this issue. So I think that's unfortunate in terms of trying to overcome this division that has been growing in American political society.
Right, Professor. Also, just wanted to understand, what would you say is the biggest threat facing America at this point beyond partisan politics?
Beyond partisan politics? Well, I mean, the international issues, with Gaza and Ukraine, I think are pretty important globally, but also for the United States. And I think we also struggle with, kind of this long-standing issues around disinformation, misinformation. It's hard to know, the truth anymore. And I think that it kind of underlies some of the challenges we face.
It's hard to know the truth anymore. All right, Professor Ports, thank you so much for joining us on WION World as One with your perspective on this.
My pleasure.
Thank you. All right. In a sweeping move that has rattled global markets, Trump has announced a new set of punitive tariffs. At the center of his blitz, pharmaceuticals, a 100% tariff on branded or patented drugs if companies don't already have U.S. manufacturing under construction. He posted on his Truth Social, and I'm quoting here, starting the 1st of October 2025, we will be imposing a 100% tariff on any branded or patented pharmaceutical product unless a company is building their pharmaceutical manufacturing plant in America. He added there will therefore be no tariff on these pharmaceutical products if construction has started. Now let's dive into the details of the U.S. drugs trade. The U.S. imported $212 billion worth of pharma ingredients and finished products last year, nearly half from allies in Europe and Asia. Ireland was the largest supplier, followed by Switzerland and Germany. However, Ireland and Germany are exempt from pharma tariffs as part of the EU-US trade deal. The import duties for those European countries are limited to 15%. On the other hand, Switzerland will be the biggest hit with an 8% export share worth nearly $20 billion. In Asia, Singapore and India are significant suppliers. The situation is trickier for India, already locked in a tariff tussle with Trump. While the measure is mainly aimed at multinational brands, there is unease over whether complex generics or specialty medicines from India could also be pulled into the mix. India shipped over $3.6 billion worth of drugs to the US in 2024 and another $3.7 billion in just the first half of 2025. The country finds itself in a tricky spot. Trump also announced new industry-focused tariffs set to begin next Wednesday. Imported heavy trucks will be subject to a 25% duty. Upholstered furniture imports are to be taxed at 30%. Kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities will be hit with a 50% charge. The US imported about $25.5 billion in furniture in 2024, with 60% coming from China and Vietnam. Heavy trucks are another focus, with Mexico supplying the bulk of medium and heavy-duty vehicles. However, those trucks include over 50% of parts made in the US. Exempting them under the USMCA trade deal, Canada, Japan, Germany and Finland are also key suppliers. However, the lack of details on Trump's latest tariffs is creating widespread panic, as has been the case with the president's policy announcements on social platforms this year. These countries are close US allies under previous trade deals, raising questions about the legality of Trump's actions under existing agreements. Critics warn the tariffs could fuel inflation by raising transport and consumer costs, while allies may retaliate or challenge the measures at the WTO. Trump, however, maintains tariffs are a core foreign policy tool and a revenue source, with his Treasury Department projecting $300 billion in collections by year end. More importantly, the lack of details on these tariffs is adding to the panic. UN member states are calling for a landmark change in the international body's future leadership. Several leaders have urged for the next Secretary General of the UN to be a woman.
After 80 years, it is high time for a woman to be a Secretary General of the United Nations. In a world dominated by strong men, often with weapons, we need strong women with wisdom and empathy.
Leaders from Liechtenstein and Ghana, among other nations, urged member states to vote for a woman Secretary General for the next tenure, something that has not happened in the UN's 80-year existence so far. The next UN General Secretary General, will take office on the 1st of January 2027 after incumbent leader Antonio Guterres' term comes to an end in December next year. Earlier this year, UN General Assembly elected a woman as its presiding head after member states voted overwhelmingly in favor of Germany's former Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. Several countries now hope that a similar sentiment will reflect in next year's voting, and the UN will have its first ever woman Secretary General. Moldova, a country of just over 2 million people, will head to parliamentary polls in just 2 days in what many have called the most important election in the history of the country. Elections in the former Soviet Republic are being closely watched, as it will determine whether Moldova continues on the path of integration with the West or moves back into Russia's orbit. The polls come on the back of Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, and many fear that Moscow has already unleashed a misinformation campaign to influence poll outcomes.
The Kremlin is pouring hundreds of millions of euros to buy hundreds of thousands of votes on both banks of the Dnistru River and abroad. People are intoxicated daily with lies. Hundreds of individuals are paid to provoke disorder, violence, and spread fear.
Moldova says it is fighting a hybrid war against Russian bot networks, fake government orders, and Moscow-subordinated church priests. Russia is allegedly involved in amplification of fake news, criticism against the government, and anti-EU narratives. Nestled between Romania and Ukraine, Moldova has an outsized influence in global politics, given its proximity to Ukraine and the NATO alliance. In the last polls in 2021, Moldovans elected pro-Western and pro-EU President Maia Sandu with a healthy majority, and since then, Moldova has applied for EU membership and hopes to join the Union by 2030. But polls suggest that Sandu's pro-European party may face a serious challenge from pro-Russian parties. Key challengers in the fray include Igor Dodon, who Sandu unseated in 2020. Part of the pro-Russian patriotic bloc, Dodon seeks closer ties with Russia. Another key challenger is Stoyanoglu, the presidential runner-up of last year and part of the alternative bloc. If recent polls are anything to go by, the parliamentary elections in 2 days is anything but a done deal. According to latest surveys, the pro-Russia and pro-EU parties are locked in a close battle, and the results would determine more than Moldova's political identity. With the stakes high, European nations and Russia will be watching closely. And fresh legal trouble for South Korea's ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol as the first trial formally begins. Yoon is facing additional charges. Appearing at the opening of his first trial, the 64-year-old ousted leader wore a badge marked 3617, which is his inmate number. In the video, Yoon also appeared to be visibly thin. Prosecution has additionally charged Yoon Suk-yeol with obstructing official duties and abuse of power. Both charges are in connection with the martial law debacle that unfolded in December last year and triggered months of political chaos in South Korea. The case being heard at Seoul Central District Court hinges on accusations that Yoon interfered with the execution of an arrest warrant and violated cabinet members' rights during the declaration of emergency rule. Yoon landed in serious legal and administrative trouble as he called for martial law in the country in his capacity as then president. While the order barely lasted a few hours, it was revoked. South Korea plunged into major chaos and months-long protests then gripped the country. And chaos erupted in Madagascar's capital as protests over frequent power outages and water shortages turned violent, leading authorities to impose a curfew in the capital. Madagascar police fired tear gas to disperse thousands of mostly youth protesters who were marching and carrying placards. Visuals from the protest site showed crowds running away in the streets as tear gas was fired. Homes belonging to politicians close to President Andrei Rajoelina were also attacked, underscoring the deepening public frustration with the administration. The protests, largely driven by youth and mobilized through social media platforms, began early in the day and quickly escalated. Demonstrators blocked roads with burning tires and rocks, demanding immediate action from the government to address the deteriorating public services.
Give the people water, give the people electricity. The people are suffering too much. You in high places take advantage of your power. The people are suffering too much. The people are suffering too much.
Now, despite the country's rich natural resources, poverty remains widespread and critics accuse the government of failing to improve living conditions since President's re-election in 2023. And with that, we call to wrap on this edition of Race to Power. News and updates will continue on the other side on WION World is One. Stay tuned.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at